Welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. Whatever happened to you yesterday, you had a better day than Kevin McCarthy, I think. So joining me on this Friday edition of the Bulwark podcast, my colleague, Tim Miller. How are you, Tim?
You hate to see it, don't you, Charlie? I'm doing pretty good. The Nuggets lost last night, and really we're about to get swept, and so that's painful for me personally. But
Well,
a little Schadenfreude, you know, and Kevin
more
McCarthy.
than a little. So I actually had built my entire newsletter around what happened down in Florida with Ron DeSantis and sort of, the politics of vengeance. So as I was going to bed last night, I'm thinking, hey, I am in great shape. I'll be able to sleep in because I already have the newsletter written in, and I have this great analysis of the politics behind what Republicans are doing in Florida, where they have completely internalized the idea of retaliating against private companies for political stances. And then, of course, I look at my phone, which is always a mistake before you go to bed, and I see that, Lordy, there were tapes.
I should have warned you. J-Mart sent me. He doesn't tell me anything, so I'm not betraying any confidences. But he did send me a text with the booking on Maddow and just said, "You might want to watch this. I think you'll enjoy this." So I should have given you a warning that something was coming on Rachel Maddow. I feel bad about that. Then maybe you could have been prepared for your loss of sleep.
Well, as I wrote, so I realized that, I'm going to have to do Kevin McCarthy because it's the biggest story. It's also just too delicious. I'm sorry. I
So
just
good. It's just so
and,
good.
and as I wrote, watching McCarthy over the last 24 hours has been like, peeling an onion of humiliation, and we're not done yet. So everybody knows the background of all of this, right? So we kind of knew some of it, after January 6th. McCarthy had this spasm of conscience. It faded very quickly, but he gave that speech on the floor of the House. And then yesterday morning, we had that rather, bombshell report in the New York Times, by Alex Burns and Jonathan Martin about the comments that McCarthy and Mitch McConnell had made to colleagues, how disgusted they were, how they were done with Trump, how they, really thought that he needed to go, that McCarthy said he was going to tell him to resign. McConnell didn't say anything, which sort of confirmed the story, right? McConnell just kept his head down. He kept the head inside the turtle shell. But McCarthy obviously understands that his entire future depends on Trump's favor, right? His entire speakership, this is his entire focus of his life. So he had to reassure the audience of one down in Mar-a-Lago. They never said this. So he issues this blanket denial midday, saying that the Times report was totally false and wrong. And it's like, usually it doesn't happen in this compressed a fashion. By evening,
if the reporters were interested in truth, they would have come to me for a comment. I wonder why they didn't need to come to him for a comment.
And so it was like, okay, you've taken the bait. And the two reporters go on Rachel Maddow's show, and they said, yes, and we have audio tapes showing him saying exactly what he had just denied saying. So let's play this recording in which he's on a conference call, and he's having an exchange with Liz Cheney, which has its own elements of irony, which we will get to. So let's play the first one because there's more this morning. Let's play the first one, though.
Liz, you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin. I guess there's
Liz
a question. When we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution, and you asked if what happens if it gets there after he's gone. Is there any chance? Are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?
I've had some few discussions. My gut tells me no. I'm seriously thinking of having that conversation with him tonight. I haven't talked to him in a couple days.
Seriously thinking.
From what I know of him, you guys all know him too. Do you think he'd ever back away? But
no.
What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call him. This is what I think. No, it'll pass the House. I think there's a chance it'll pass the Senate even when he's gone. And I think there's a lot of different ramifications for that. Now, I haven't had a discussion with the Dems that if he did resign, would it not happen? Now, this is one personal fear I have. I do not want to get into any conversations about Pence partying, anything like that. The only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign.
Well,
I mean, that would be my take, but I don't think he would take it, but I don't know.
So, Tim, your initial take on that?
Well, I just want to start first with Liz Cheney, who I don't know. I don't have any special insight of where this audio came from, but let's just say whoever it was, thank you. A very thorough slow clap from me on deciding to leak this. I was just saying last night on the...
She's saying it wasn't her, just for the record.
Okay. Sure. That sounds right. I get it could have been a birdie, could have been the deep state. Who knows who else could have been on that call? As I was saying last night on the live stream, before this had come out, on the JD Vance text, did you see that? His law school buddy leaked his text where he said Trump might be Hitler. I felt like we didn't have enough of that during the Trump term. I think that there were a lot of these guys who were sending texts that didn't match what they were saying publicly. And I wish we would have had more text leaking because, in general, I'm not for, betraying confidences. But when someone as bad as Trump has taken power and these guys are on TV apologizing for him, I think that the rules of decorum on these sorts of leaks are long past. And so I'm very happy that she leaked this. I'm very happy that that little Kevin just walked right into the trap. I mean, that state to put out such an unequivocal statement. And you can tell that the best part of that for me, just as a strategic matter, is he's like, what would Mr. Trump do? Right. And this statement is exactly what McConnell went by the old school of politics, right? I'm going to see how this plays out. I'm going to be strategic. Kevin McCarthy went straight to the full-throated denial, the fake news, blah, blah, blah. And then he just gets burned within an hour. That is so delicious on its own.
I agree with all of that. I mean, the fact is that he obviously didn't know there was a tape. Right. Otherwise, he would have been profoundly stupid. But I think the interesting thing about this is, and I think Jonah Goldberg had an interesting take, and he says, I think there would be no more fitting end to Kevin McCarthy's dream of becoming speaker than the scandal of him being exposed as privately believing the right and moral thing. So here's this brief moment where he knew what his duty was. He knew what his oath of office was. And he got over it quickly. Yes, there's cowardice, but as I said last night, there's also, some deep, deep cynicism there, where he decided that his ambition and power was more important than actually doing his duty. If in fact he loses the speakership over this, it's not because he was caught flagrantly lying. I mean, we want to be very clear about this. Being caught in a flagrant lie in real time will not in itself be disqualifying that in this Republican Party. We know that that's been established, but it comes down to the fact that the next speakership is subject to the whim of Donald Trump. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it? He's, if Donald Trump decides that this is that he was just too dumb or too disloyal, he's finished. He's toast, and there's nothing he can do about it.
Yeah. So first on the politics of this, to that point, to the speakership point, the only thing that just doesn't give this a 10 out of 10 on the Schadenfreude scale is that I don't think he loses the speakership over this, and here's why. This is my second JD. I'm really riled up about all JD Vance too, as you can tell. It's my second reference already. But the Trump JD Vance endorsement, I feel like I sort of missed what I should have seen on this. And Sarah Longwell actually was right on about this. Trump likes it when people humiliate themselves. In his defense, right? It's somebody that tries to show some distance and some courage and then grovels back. That just kind of tickles the little dark spot inside Trump's soul because his father didn't love him in a way that the other stuff doesn't. So that really satisfies him. So I think that McCarthy revealing that in private he was thinking about showing some courage, but he didn't. Instead, he is just sort of got leashed back down to Mar-a-Lago where he would rub Trump's back. I think that actually probably satisfies Trump enough that he doesn't try to kill him over this. That's the politics of this.
Okay, let me give you a completely different take on all of that. So he likes people like Dr. Oz and JD Vance because they have a certain celebrity status, which he values disproportionately. So he kind of likes it when celebrities will admit that they were wrong.
Yeah.
But there's the flip side of him which is that, and we've seen this over and over again, that Donald Trump also has a, certain contempt for people who are too egregious in their toe licking. He looks
Too
down, he
slavish.
despises,
Yeah.
he likes poking them because what it is it's a sign of weakness. You're a loser. And he looks at Kevin McCarthy and there's nothing charismatic. There's nothing celebrity-like. The guy has not had a TV show. He's never had a best-selling book, right? He's just a toady.
Did the Young Guns book that he co-authored with Paul Ryan and Eric Cantor, was that not a bestseller?
I'm pretty sure not. Yeah, I'm willing to bet without looking it up that it was not a bestseller. But I mean, there's a certain, yes, Donald Trump, like many narcissists, like people who grovel to them, but they also despise them. And so I think that that's the other dynamic at work here. So
maybe one other thing just on the substance. That's a little bit of a parlor game about whether whether he'll stay in the speakership. The other element, just really quick on the parlor game, is that there isn't a great alternative, right? In a lot of these situations, I mean, Jim Jordan, I guess, is the alternative, but
Elise Stefanik.
Elise, I guess that's true. But boy, that would be a quick rise. Though, I mean, she's demonstrated a shamelessness and willing to shiv people in the back. It is a superpower.
Absolutely.
That's a good parlor game to throw out there. Elise, with the knife in the kitchen on McCarthy, that's possible. On the substance, though, cowardly Kevin kind of betrays his cowardice during that audio. I mean, it's good audio, right? Because he's saying the words are right, but he's hesitant. And just think back to how you felt on when was this tape, January 10th or 11th? Within a week of the Capitol siege. And anger. I felt just this deep, abiding rage about the fact that these guys allowed this to happen, that Donald Trump incited it, that it was so unnecessary, that it was just a stain on the country, the deaths, the injured, the police that suffered injuries. I had this rage, that Kevin didn't share in that audio, right? He's saying to Liz, oh, I'm gonna call Trump and do the right thing. But I don't know that I was convinced, right? I don't know if I was on the Liz Cheney side of that call, with my steely reserve and a determination that something must be done. I don't think that I hang up and say, that guy's gonna do what he just told me he's gonna do, right? That to me sounded, kind of like a Kevin in his essence, right? A weaselly operator who is trying to tell Liz what she wants to hear, telling Trump what he wants to hear, telling Jim Jordan what he wants to hear, and just trying to survive his way through this. And I think that is maybe the most revealing thing just about who Kevin is. And, the question, I guess, just is about how long he can survive, trying to walk that tightrope.
So you mentioned the fact that, and this is, I think, one of the delicious ironies of this particular moment, is he's having this conversation with, of all people in the universe, Liz Cheney. As and Sarah pointed this out. Sarah Longwell tweeted this out. How infuriating this is. Kevin McCarthy's casually discussing the 25th Amendment, telling Trump to resign and making sure that Pence won't pardon him, with Liz Cheney, only to weeks later kick Cheney out of leadership for saying the same things he did. Okay, so there you are. They agree. They have the exact same position. And Kevin McCarthy decides there's no place for Liz Cheney in leadership. In fact, there's no place for Liz Cheney in the Republican Party for believing exactly the same thing that he said. Okay, so there's
she won't move on. Charlie, that was her crime, right? She won't move on.
He moved on with about 1 million of fundraising, as you've written about, 1 million fundraising appeals touting Donald Trump. Well, anyway, there's more. Wait, there's more. The reporters obviously have more audio tape. And this morning, CNN dropped some more of the tape, once again showing Kevin McCarthy saying explicitly, word for word, what he denied saying less than 24 hours ago. Let's go to CNN.
Breaking news into CNN. We are now getting more stunning new audio obtained by the New York Times, where House Minority Speaker Kevin McCarthy slams former President Trump for his role in the Capitol and the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. Let's listen.
But let me be very clear to all of you, and I've been very clear to the president. He bears responsibilities for his words and actions. No ifs, ands, or buts. I asked him personally today, Does he hold responsibility for what happened? Does he feel bad about what happened? He told me he does have some responsibility for what happened.
Really?
And he needs to acknowledge that.
So there you had a little bit of righteous anger where Kevin McCarthy very explicitly saying that Donald Trump told him he bore some responsibility. I suppose in this context, we ought to recall that Kevin McCarthy has done everything possible to stop this investigation, refusing to cooperate with this investigation, saying on multiple occasions that he has nothing to add to any of the public commentary about that. So what do you make of that? Because that was obviously on a conference call. I believe it was January 11th. Lots of people tuned in, and there's Kevin McCarthy, and apparently he goes on to say that he's done with him. That quote that he's absolutely done with him, that it's not defensible and no one should defend him.
That word responsibility, I'm not sure. I'm not sure McCarthy. I'm not sure it means what McCarthy thinks it means, because responsibility requires accountability, right? Responsibility requires, having to deal with the consequences of one's actions, and not only did McCarthy show no interest in forcing Donald Trump to do that, he has actually done the opposite, ensured that he didn't require any responsibility, as you pointed out, when it comes to trying to block the 1-6 committee, when it comes to voting for impeachment, defending the people that took a vote of conscience, that wanted to try to hold him accountable within his caucus, who did vote to impeach. Most of them are being purged. So, again, I think that this is what this reveals to me is that we knew more about these guys and the pickle that they were in. And that's about the nicest way you can put it, because they put themselves in this pickle. But we understood more about their trap than they understood about themselves. Because I do think that on January 11th, we're within 5 days of this. Trump is flailing. They know impeachment's coming. Biden's coming in 9 days. They think that they might be rid of this guy. And I think that Kevin was probably speaking honestly about how he felt, right? That he felt at that time that Trump needs to hold responsibility. He needs to take accountability. Maybe that'll actually help the party. They didn't know, like the polls weren't out yet, right? They didn't know how bad this was going to hurt the Republican brand. They thought they were thinking worst case scenario, right? Like maybe we go down to Bush Katrina levels or something. And, we need him to speak out to this to save us, right? So it was, I think, of both a moral and a practical position that he was taking at that moment, January 11th. But we all knew, those of us who had not been making this moral sacrifice for the last 5 years, we had the clarity to be able to see that they were stuck in this trap. They were stuck with him. Like they were in the boat with him, and he is in the boat with them, and that they were going to have to come groveling back to him if they wanted to stay in the good graces of their voters, and that they were all cowards, and that none of them had the spine to stand up to them. Liz Cheney ended up being the only one, and I guess Kinzinger and Cheney ended up being the only ones who steeled themselves and said, no, we're going to change. We're getting out of the boat, right? And so I think that it was very predictable that they would end up come groveling back, because they ended up being hostage to the very people that got them there.
Well, obviously that's true. They did go back. At the time, I thought this was a perfect opportunity to take one of the off-ramps, one of the many off-ramp opportunities that they had. This being the, obviously the clearest that was, and acknowledged as such by even by Kevin McCarthy. And I do wonder what the moment was when they decided cynically that no, we're not going to do that. Did somebody hand them a poll of the base? Probably. But again, this soundbite that's been released today, has this very, very clear soundbite of Kevin McCarthy saying that I've had it with this guy. What he did is unacceptable. Nobody can defend that, and nobody should defend it. And then, of course, he spent the next 16 months humiliating himself in every way possible, including having to kowtow to Marjorie Taylor Greene. And here we are. So I was on a Canadian Sirius XM interview this morning, and they were asking, is there any indication that Donald Trump's, hold on the party is slipping? And I said, well, not yet, because in order for that to happen, somebody has to stand up and hold him accountable. Somebody has to be the one to say, no more. And what we're seeing again is this very long pattern of people being willing to say that in private, but not being willing to say it in public because they're always hoping that somebody else will solve this problem for them, and therefore it never gets solved.
Yeah, two things on this. One, I just want to sort of revise and extend my remarks.
Yeah.
I knew that these guys were going to be cowards, and it was and I knew on January 11th that Kevin McCarthy wasn't going to actually hold them accountable, even if Kevin didn't know it himself. But I don't think that means that they couldn't have. And I do think that right now, if you look at it from the perspective of here, April 2022, they did have, to your point, they did have an off ramp. Had Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy et al. Locked arms, and this is why you can't leave Mitch out of this, because Mitch is just as guilty, if not worse, than Kevin McCarthy, because McCarthy is such a coward, and Mitch was calculating this the whole way. Had they locked arms, and they gotten 17 senators, to impeach and remove and prevent him from running for office again, there would have been short-term pain. There may have even been violence. I mean, I think that they were legitimately scared of their own voters at that time. And so it would have required courage, actual courage, which we knew these guys don't have. But just as a counterfactual, now here we are now, and we're about to move on here in this podcast talking about communist Disney and Ron DeSantis and all the other things that these guys are, the board, all the other outrages that they have. I think that their voters would have moved on. The voters would have moved on. They would have moved on to hating Joe Biden. They would have moved on to the Disney enemy, and there would have been some dead enders. But I think folks would have been happy to just move on to Ron DeSantis or whoever's next in line, and they could have done it, and they just didn't have the balls.
I think you're right. I think they would have moved on because our attention spans are so short. And if they had locked arms and said, "Okay, this is done. We have to, turn the page." It's like, see, this is part of the irony of all of this: is the Republicans have no shortage of things to get themselves worked up about. They have no shortage of things to be outraged about. They have no shortage of enemies, right? And in many ways, having to constantly relitigate 2020 is a distraction from what otherwise is working pretty good for them. So
these things cut both ways. Like when these audio comes out, you have to know there's some people in these conversations that are like, maybe here's our another alpha, maybe here's our opportunity, because they want this guy to disappear, right? That's what not all of them, but that's what
many Democrats will take care of it for us.
Yeah, that's what many of them want. Somebody will take care of it for us. Maybe he just won't run. And here they are again. It's the same right now where they sit right now today is the same place they sat on January 5th.
Yeah.
We have to humor this guy so that we can win these 2 Georgia Senate seats. We have to do it. And they did it, and they lose the seats anyway. And then the next day, the Capitol gets stormed. 5 people die, right? And today they're doing the same thing. We'll just humor this guy through the midterms, right? And then Ron DeSantis can come in and save us, or then the hamburgers, the actuarial tables will save us, or then whatever, the voters might come to their senses. Who knows, And so they just keep kicking the can, and we're in year 7 of nobody actually showing any balls, and that is why, as delicious as this is and as wonderful it is, it's also just like the same damn story that we've been talking about.
It is the same damn story over and over again. This time we have the tapes. In case there was any doubt, for 5-6 years, we've been telling the story. Well, in private, they say X, Y, and Z, but then they turn around and say something opposite. And at some point, I can imagine people are going, "Really? Do they really say this?" Well, now you know. Okay, so let's turn the page, shall we, Tim?
Buy Jonathan's book on that, by the way. Jonathan and Alex, they're doing great work.
This is great work. All right, let's you and I turn the page now and talk about what Ron DeSantis and the Florida Republicans just did and what it says about the future of the Republican Party, because I think this is a rather extraordinary moment. So let's talk about that right after this. So if you wake up every morning thinking, "I wish this bag under my eye would just go away," you're obviously not alone, because bags and puffiness under the eyes are a problem for millions of American men and women until now. Introducing the new Genucell serum with plant stem cell technology from Chamonix. Susan from New Jersey wrote, "I've been using Genucell for a couple of months, and the puffiness around my eyes is gone. Even the crow's feet and the small lines have disappeared and haven't come back. I love your product. I use it under my eyes, around my cheekbones, and on my eyelids." So not only Susan, folks, I know people who use it and who love it. And with its instant effects, you will see results in the first 12 hours, guaranteed, or your money back. During the Genucel Mother's Day sale, you can save up to 50% off all Genucel products at genucel.com now. Go to genucel.com/bulwark, genucel.com/bulwark. Order today, and Chamonix will include a surprise luxury gift absolutely free. Genucel.com/bulwark, genucel.com/bulwark. That's genucel.com/bulwark. All right, we are back with Tim Miller. Acting with extraordinary speed, the Republican-dominated legislature in Florida has voted to strip Disney of its tax status. We could talk about whether it's how special that tax status is, but the one thing I think is pretty obvious is that they acted in pure retaliation for Disney's position on LGBTQ rights, the opposition to the gender education law just passed by the legislature. And what's extraordinary about this, Tim, is kind of how naked the use of the mailed fist of government to punish a private corporation for its political positions is, and how widespread the support in the right-wing media is for all of this. So this is not just a one-off. Pretty much across the board, with the exception of Charlie Cook over at National Review, you see right-wing media just applauding Ron DeSantis. Go, let's attack all of these private companies. So, once again, world turned upside down, screw the free market, screw Citizens United and all of that. It is kind of a reminder that we're kind of in a new stage of the culture war, aren't we?
We are, and I want to get to your exact point in a second, but I do just want to just take the lens back a minute and just do a little Bulwark victory lap on this, because I saw in the middle of February that this was going to be a shitstorm of epic proportions, and this was coming down the pike, and that everybody needed to take it seriously, and I was not getting booked to talk about it. I think that there was obviously social media discussion about this, but I think that there was a sense that this was some crazy thing going on in the Florida legislature, and we're on this from the start, and it is not only just going to envelop Florida politics, but it's coming to everywhere. I mean, there are 19 now other states where a similar type of bill has been introduced, and it was something that we sniffed out. And one of the reasons why I sniffed it out is I saw the conservative media circle the wagons on this, and it was really when I saw Ben Shapiro over on his show go full-throated in defense of this bill and say explicitly that he wanted teachers to be targeted, that he wanted them to be scared, that he did not feel like gay teachers had any rights to talk about themselves. I saw that and I was like, man, this is not American greatness. Say what you want about Ben Shapiro, not certainly nowhere near where we've been on Trump, but he's tended to like hew towards the middle of where the party is, right? Like not the most extremist MAGA stuff, but the middle, normal crazy, standard crazy within the party.
Right.
And I was like, man, if he's coming full for this, and if DeSantis, who's the heir apparent, is pushing this, this is it. This is coming. And now we see that is exactly right. And what we have here is like basically Chick-fil-A part 2, but on the inverse, right? And this is how things have turned upside down. To your point, Charlie, is that the whole point back during the Chick-fil-A saga of the 2010s was that in certain places, Democrats wanted to punish Chick-fil-A for being anti-gay, and there were like cities that like we're not going to give Chick-fil-A we're not going to approve their whatever
concession or
yeah,
something. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, we're not going to approve them for coming into our city, and that was wrong. But it ended up becoming more than that, right? Just this big cultural fight about should we be boycotting it, and then Republicans started like having Chick-fil-A at at the Republican conferences. You have to order Chick-fil-A now, in order to support our team. And that was, kind of the embers of this starting, and now you see all the things that Republicans said during that time about the left, which is like that they're bullies and they're targeting us, which had a hint of truth in certain cases. Now they are doing the exact same thing, and it's the same thing as in sports. You used to say, "Well, ESPN is so woke. ESPN is so woke. We want to get politics out." Like this was where the Republican posture started. We need politics out of corporations. We need politics out of sports. Politics out of movies, and the liberals are just trying to stuff this down our throats. And now that posture has changed, and no longer is that where they stand. It is, we need to stuff our political power down your throats. We need to stuff our political ideology and insert it into every aspect of American life. It's very pernicious, and it is a complete flip from what the posture had been on the right for a long time.
Well, and it's very, very explicit, and it's very explicit that they want to use the power of government to get revenge against companies that take political stands they disagree with. And you mentioned Ben Shapiro, so here's 2 tweets from Ben Shapiro yesterday as an indicator of where this is going. So he tweeted, "If corporations choose to exit the free market by seeking media and legal dispensation from anti-market leftists pushing radical social values," whatever that means, "don't count on those of us who love free markets to defend you. Fuck around and find out." Of course, he had asterisks there, whatever. So, corporations exiting the free market somehow. I mean, this kind of this bent, logic. Then he tweeted out, "Corporations have an interest in lobbying on issues that directly impact their business. If they choose to engage in politics outside their purview, they will be treated with all the aggression inherent to the political sphere, and they will deserve it." So again, no subtlety here. We will punish you for your political speech. These were people who 5 minutes ago were defending Citizens United that said that corporations should be able to engage in
corporations
any
are people.
Exactly. So can I just pull back the lens a little bit, since you're a little obsessed with J.D. Vance? Because I do think people need to understand the larger context of all this. So there was a Vanity Fair piece about J.D. Vance the other day, and it quotes him, talking about J.D. Vance, what he, some of the things he was saying on a very extreme right-wing podcast. He said, "I tend to think we should seize the institutions of the left and turn them against the left. We need like a de-Bathification program, a de-wokeification program." And then he says, "I think Trump is going to run again in 2024. I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state," that would work out well, "replace them with our people," what could go wrong, "and," he goes on, "when the courts stop you, stand before the country and say," claiming to quote Andrew Jackson, "the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it." Okay, deep breath here. The whole concept now animating, the right wingers like Vance is revenge and ignoring the law, being willing to defy the rule of law, being willing to defy the courts. But again, it is this whole sense of revenge. Now, just bear with me for a second, because let's go back to Florida and what Ron DeSantis did to punish Disney. And by the way, Charlie Cook at National Review did a great job pointing out that this quote unquote special status, there are more than 1,000 special kind of carve outs like this. The Villages has a special tax status, Daytona Speedway, the airport. This is not that unusual. But Charlie Cook who we disagree with on many things, he made a really interesting point. He said, a lot of people on the right are defending DeSantis's vengeance campaign against Disney as a sign that he's willing to fight in a victory for conservatism. He said, but this is silly because DeSantis and the Republicans had already actually won. They got the Florida law passed. It passed both houses. It was signed by DeSantis, who was defiant of Disney. And he says, look, so there's no need for the Republican Party of Florida to salt the earth here. It has prevailed in every particular. So then what's the point? What is the point other than sort of raw, reflexive vengeance? I get everything I want to. There's no policy point in what they're doing to Disney other than to intimidate and punish them. And that's what's got people on the right really jazzed up. They like it and they want more of it.
Okay, I'm taking a really deep breath now because you're hitting all my anger centers. Ben Shapiro, Charlie Cook, JD Vance. I mean, we'll start with Charlie because he's the most mild as a group. I do wonder if he's been in a coma for 6 years because that's what Republicans want. They want vengeance against the left and vengeance against our enemy. That's why Donald Trump was nominated and elected. That's why he That's why he remains the most popular person within the party. That's exactly why Ron DeSantis is doing this. It's look around. This is the team you're on. Same article. I agree with you. A good defense of why this is bad. Also calls the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida reasonable. So not 100% with Charlie on the article.
Right. No.
Going back to Ben Shapiro's argument really quick, and then I want to get to JD Vance because I'm so happy you went there, and this stuff all does connect together. The notion that what Disney was doing does not impact their business, I think is very revealing, right? Because for years, Republicans have been fine with corporations advocating for various things that either directly or indirectly impact their business. The Kochs have done it tons in politics, advocating for obviously I guess Republicans think this directly impacts their business, right? If Ben Shapiro's mindset, if a corporation wants lower taxes for themselves, well, that's okay for the corporations to get involved in that kind of politics and that kind of political speech because that's a direct impact on their business. If a corporation wants to support veterans, right, and wants to get some benefits from the government because they support veterans, is that directly impacting their business? I guess kind of, right? It's good PR for corporations to impact veterans, and they have some veterans that work in their companies, right? And so if they're trying to get benefits from the government because of the way they treat veterans, then I guess that impacts their business. But for some reason, when corporations want to advocate on behalf of their staff who are upset with what government is doing that is marginalizing them or punishing them, that doesn't impact their business. Ben for some reason thinks that this bill in Florida doesn't impact Disney's business. Well, what about Disney has gay people that work there? Disney has trans people that work there. Disney have people who have kids in the schools that are mad that they have to live in Orlando because that's where Disney is based, and they don't want their kids going to a school in Orlando where gays are going to be discriminated against. So the people that work there get mad. I've got a newsflash for you, Ben Shapiro and others. There are a lot of gay people that work at Disney World. I don't want to be stereotyping, but the actor that's playing Prince Charming at Disneyland, let's just, I think that, we're going to have a decent amount of gay staff, working at the Disney on Ice and the various Disney properties. And so the fact that they're upset that their kids or their friends' kids would go to a school where they're going to be discriminated against and yelling at their bosses about that and thinking about moving and thinking about quitting, hell yes, this impacts the actual company. And so this is how they justify it to themselves. Though they say that this is all just these companies being woke and blah blah blah, and there's no hypocrisy here because companies can advocate for tax cuts and that's fine, but as soon as they advocate for gay rights, now that's outside their remit. And that is just a bunch of bullshit from the start. It is just how he justifies his hypocrisy, how he justifies his anti-gay cruelty, and how he justifies his activism on this. And in this case, they are no different than all of the people that they claim to hate on the left that targeted, Mozilla. And actually they're worse than all those people because the people on the left that targeted Mozilla and Chick-fil-A were at least defending people's rights rather than trying to limit people's rights. So that's on Ben. Do you have anything on that before I move to JD Vance?
Well, one sidebar, though, on all of this, and because this was all done so very, very quickly, and I don't think most people have paid real attention to the details of what this legislation will mean, and apparently it's got a delay to 2023, to go into effect. Because Disney has this special tax status, it means that there are bonds and there are debts and things like that, which will now be transferred to property taxpayers in the surrounding counties. And there are some estimates, and I'm not an expert in all this, but there are some estimates that are being reported that this will raise people's property taxes throughout that entire area by an average of about $2,000 a piece per home. There are all kinds of problems, not to mention the fact that, look, this will be litigated. It's going to go to court. Ron DeSantis knows that. He knows he's going to spend a lot of money on that, and then he can blame, liberal judges for not having it. But to your point about becoming what you claim to hate here, and how this all escalates. Imagine if you had Democratic legislatures and Democratic governors decide, you know what, we're going to use our power to attack Elon Musk Corporation, to go after the Koch brothers, to go after Thiel, to go after, say, in Wisconsin and in Illinois, the Uline Corporation, by doing things about their infrastructure or their tax status or their copyrights, very specifically targeted at punishing them for their political action. Conservatives would immediately recognize that as authoritarian. They would immediately recognize that as socialist, which, by the way, your buddy, the Democratic governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, who is a Democrat, put out a tweet referring to Ron DeSantis' attack on Disney as the authoritarian socialist attack on private companies. And it was interesting. And I hope that other Democrats notice that you call them out on this. You turn these, you turn the whole socialist thing on its head when you have conservatives who, up till 5 minutes ago, recognize why this would be very dangerous to have politicians decide to punish private individuals for their political speech. And Jared Polis is turning it right around on Ron DeSantis, and more of that.
I think not only more of that, but I think you make a great point on the tax base and the jobs. This ties to everything, right? Like, I want to see more ads from the Democrats that show Ted Cruz talking about Mickey and Pluto making love. And it's like, This is what they care about. Okay, this is what they care about. They're passing legislation to deal with their weird fantasies about cartoon sex. Okay, and what it's doing is punishing real people. It's punishing the people that are going to have to pay more taxes in Orlando. It's punishing people who are going to lose jobs in Orlando. It's punishing, the families that are going to be discriminated against. Like that, you're worried about inflation. They're not fucking worried about inflation. They're worried about putting regulations on who Mickey can kiss in movies. That's not popular. Okay. So not only is it socialist, not only does it have authoritarian tendencies, which we'll get into the JD Vance thing, but it's also not popularist to your newsletter yesterday. And I think that there are opportunities here to expose where they are putting their focus. And there's certain ways in which they're overplaying their hand, because right now Republicans don't feel like they have to be responsible for anything because the Democrats control everything.
Right.
And so they feel like they can just criticize. But they do. They're running certain states. They are in Congress. It's a tied Senate, right? There are things they could be, if people's lives wanted to get better, there are things Republicans could be doing right now to help get their lives better, and they're not, because they want to punish gay people and punish their enemies, in corporations. And obviously, it would be very easy to see, and you would know exactly what Republicans would say if the shoe was on the other foot on this. To the JD Vance, go ahead.
And yet, I think that things like this might propel Ron DeSantis to the Republican nomination.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's working right now.
And I think that the line that you get from, some of the folks, the National Review, Rich Lowry folks, is that, well, no, he's just a normal Republican. He's a more competent version of Donald Trump. But, in a lot of ways, that is frightening, because his authoritarian socialist instincts are so raw. And, Jonathan Chait wrote this yesterday, said what DeSantis is building in Florida is his blueprint for the country. And I don't think that's wrong. And I think that when you think of somebody who is competent with those instincts, in many ways will be dangerous in a different way than Donald Trump, but also profoundly dangerous.
Yeah, I wouldn't be excited, by the way, if there was a Democrat running for president in 2024 that was running a state right now and was trying to punish Christians and trying to punish Elon Musk. Right? You know what I mean? If the shoe was on the other foot, I wouldn't be excited about that either. So this notion that Ron DeSantis is something normal is crazy. They're saying it to convince themselves. They've all convinced themselves of their own bullshit. The problem with Trump was the tweets. The problem with Trump wasn't the tweets. Okay, it's the authoritarian bent of the Republican Party, and which takes us back to my friend JD Vance. There has never been a more mask is off quote than that quote that you read in Vanity Fair.
Right.
And this notion it's an apocryphal quote about Andrew Jackson, but the idea that you'd want Andrew Jackson as a model in the first place is a little concerning, but it's a fake quote. But this notion that what Trump should do, if he's to get back in there, is to act extra legally, extra constitutionally against the Constitution, and challenge this and basically dare the Supreme Court to come F with him. Okay, that's what JD Vance is calling for. He's saying that Donald Trump should deliberately break the law, should deliberately break the Constitution, and then stare down John Roberts and say, "Where's your army to come for me?" That is so far outside the bounds of what has been advocated for within our politics during my lifetime.
It's explicitly post-constitutional. It's an acknowledgement that it's illegal, that the courts would rule against you, and then simply refuse to follow the law. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah, and so I mean, in this case, he's talking about it for hirings and firings. But think about what that could extend to. Like, it could extend to so many things. And he's right, by the way. And this is the scary part about it, is that the Supreme Court doesn't have an army. And so this whole time, and this is where I get, and this is how we circle it all back to our friend Charlie Cook and Rich Lowry. This whole time, the people like them, Cook and Lowry, and their ilk, which is a very wide ilk within the party, like their whole case around Trump was, he's a big middle finger to the country, but our institutions will hold. Are the norm, the institutions basically held, right? Like, yeah, 5 people died at the Capitol, but all things considered, the Muslim ban didn't go through, and a lot of his worst ideas didn't happen. Rich always explicitly made this case, and it kind of helped that he was a wild card, because it kept our enemies on their toes, and all of his bad ideas about foreign policy didn't really come to pass. That's the argument. Now you have the leading Republican candidate for Senate in Ohio making explicitly the opposite argument, which is that we need the institutions and the norms to not hold. That the problem with the last 4 years was that the institutions held too much, and we need Trump to break through them even more. And yet, silence from those quarters, silence from the quarters of the. You would think that if Rich and Charlie and all those guys were true to their convictions, that they really didn't like the anti-democratic parts of Trump, and that they were happy that the institutions held, that there would be a full frontal attack on JD Vance and say that we want Dolan or Gibbons or one of the other candidates who have their own problem. Dolan's pretty good actually, but Gibbons are one of the other candidates who has their own problems. And we want to push one of them instead because this is really dangerous. But you don't see that.
That's a tell as well, right? That they keep saying that, well, the guardrails held, but once again, they're looking around, looking over their shoulder and thinking, well, somebody else is going to defend these things, right? Somebody else is going to draw the line. Yeah. Well, they wouldn't go that far.
There'll just be one senator.
We're willing to go along with that. I mean, this is part of the problem where they've rolled over, again and again. But this whole fantasy that somehow that DeSantis would really, you never Trumpers should get behind DeSantis because DeSantis would be, the best alternative. Ron DeSantis is basically saying, I'm going to be Trump without the stupid tweets, but perhaps with less actual restraint on my use of power. And this is the other thing. I mean, I'm going to repeat myself here, but the fact that you have the conservative media cheerleading all of this gives you an indication of just how dramatically the Republican Party and the conservative movement has changed. That it is morphed, and that even if Donald Trump disappears tomorrow, you're going to be having to deal with these forces that have been released, including the forces of hyper masculinity, and we need to fight to restore men's testicular fortitude because otherwise our testosterone levels will fall, and this is the world we live in, Tim.
I thought we'd make it through this podcast without talking about ball tanning, but I guess maybe that was
this week, though, right?
It was. It was on Monday. On Monday, I was like, I guess I'm probably not going to get into the testicle tanning on Charlie's podcast. It'll have been 5 days. we'll have moved on. But I am
still traumatized. Well, anyway, Tim, thanks for coming on, and have a great weekend.
You too, Charlie. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining me here each weekday. And also, I want to give a shout out to our Bulwark Plus members who helped to underwrite this show and keep everything we do at the Bulwark sustainable. You might think that a Bulwark Plus membership is all about our newsletters like my daily morning shots, but really, Bulwark Plus membership is about a lot more than that. We're building a community of independent-minded, concerned patriots who value democracy and the truth. We make most of what we do free and accessible by everybody because you can't help save democracy from behind a paywall, but we do have some great member-only benefits that I'd like to share with you. Because in addition to our newsletters, members have commenting privileges and also have access to ad-free versions of this show and all of the podcasts in the Bulwark Network, like Sarah Longwell's Focus Group podcast and Mona Charon's show, Beg to Differ. And there's the Thursday Night Bulwark, a live video broadcast that we host for members each week on Zoom. You can give Bulwark Plus membership a try for the next 30 days for free. Simply go to thebulwark.com/Charlie to claim your free trial today. That's thebulwark.com/Charlie. The Bulwark podcast is produced by Katie Cooper with audio production by Jonathan Siri. I'm Charlie Sykes. Thank you for listening to today's Bulwark podcast, and we'll be back tomorrow to do this all over again.
We're all juggling life, a career, and trying to build a little bit of wealth. The Brown Ambition podcast with host Mandy and Tiffany the Budgetnista can help with special guest Chris Browning.
I'll give a shout out. I have 2 coworkers, Mandy, who love your podcast. They found out about me podcasting because of the last time I was on your podcast.
That's
Brown Ambition.
We outed you.
Yeah, you did. So spread it out a little bit further.
Chances are, if you work in an office with Black women, Brown Ambition is somewhere.
Brown Ambition. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.